The silence at the dinner table was a quiet Thursday evening in Palo Alto. Outside, the sun was slowly dipping behind the hills, casting a warm orange glow over the Pichai household. Inside, the air was unusually heavy. The kind of silence that didn't come from peace, but from things left unsaid. Sundar sat at the dinner table, his fork in hand, but he hadn't touched the food on his plate. Across from him, his wife Anjali glanced at him, concerned, but chose not to say anything. Their son, Arjun, just 12, was unusually quiet too, his eyes flickering between his parents. Sundar had been home late every night that week. No explanations, just a weary face and a tired voice. Even on weekends, he had taken calls from Tokyo, Zurich, and Bangalore, often retreating to the patio with his laptop, whispering through crises that never seemed to end. And now, as he stared blankly at the plate of untouched curry and rice, something inside him was beginning to fracture. "Baba," Arjun said softly, breaking the silence. "You didn't come to the science fair today, ... The words hit Sundar like a punch to the chest. His eyes slowly lifted toward his son, and the guilt in his expression was immediate. He had forgotten. Completely. Arjun had been talking about it all week, reminding him every day. He had even printed a tiny invitation and left it on Sundar's laptop. In NJL. I closed her eyes for a second, her hand resting gently on Arjun's back, but her silence said everything. Disappointment, not anger. Just a deep, wordless sadness that Sundar couldn't ignore. I'm sorry, Arjun, Sundar whispered, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. There was a board crisis. Google Cloud went down in Europe. I won third place. Arjun interrupted, not with pride, but resignation. My volcano worked. Everyone's parents were there. Sundar felt a tightness in his throat. He opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came. He just nodded slowly and reached for his water. It tasted like nothing. Everything felt like nothing. After dinner, Sundar walked upstairs alone and sat in the dark corner of his study. There were no screens, no blinking lights, no sound of email pings, just silence. He rested his head against the wall and closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, memories began to flood back. He thought of his own father, how hard he worked, how little he spoke. But even on his busiest days as an electrical engineer in Chennai, his father had always found time for Sundar. One time, when Sundar was 7, his father left an important meeting to attend a school recital. He remembered looking out into the crowd, his voice trembling as he recited a poem about rain, and seeing his father's tired but smiling face in the back row. That smile had made him believe he could do anything. But what kind of father was he becoming now? A knock on the study door pulled him from his thoughts. Baba? Arjun's voice came gently through the wood. Sundar didn't answer at first. He felt ashamed. But the door creaked open slowly, and Arjun stepped in, holding a small notebook in his hands. I wanted to show you my volcano, Arjun said. Even if you missed it? Sundar turned on a small lamp and nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Arjun sat beside him on the floor and opened the notebook. He flipped through sketches, step-by-step photos, and even a small diagram of the eruption system he had created, using vinegar and baking soda. Sundar listened, nodding, asking quiet questions, trying to be present. This is amazing, he finally said. You did all this on your own? Arjun smiled a little. Mama helped with the glue gun. I burned myself. They both chuckled, and for a moment something between them. I'll be there for the next one, Sundar said quietly. Okay, Arjun replied, but didn't sound convinced. Later that night, while everyone slept, Sundar stayed up alone in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark, but his mind was full of noise. He thought about all the board meetings, all the press interviews, all the investor calls. He had built an empire with his mind, but now his heart was beginning to feel hollow. He turned to his phone, opened his calendar app, and stared at the appointments. Back-to-back meetings for the next 5 days. No breaks, no room to breathe. No space for Arjun. And then something happened. He heard something through the air vent, a whisper, a soft, delicate voice from down the hallway. It was Arjun. "Dear God," the boy whispered, "please help Baba. He's so tired and sad. I don't think he knows how much I love him, but I do. Please help him smile again." Sundar froze. His heart stopped for a second, then thudded back into motion with a force that brought tears instantly to his eyes. He turned off his phone, set it on the table, and buried his face in his hands. He didn't cry often, not publicly, not even privately. But in that moment, everything broke open. The pressure, the guilt, the missed moments, the forgotten smiles, all of it came crashing down in the silence of that night. He wasn't crying because he was ashamed. He was crying because he had forgotten what truly mattered. And just when he thought the moment couldn't get heavier, Arjun's door creaked open across the hallway, and the small shadow of a boy stepped into the dim corridor light, holding something in his hand. "Baba," Arjun said softly. "Are you awake?" Sundar wiped his face quickly and sat up. "Yeah, I'm here," he replied, his voice barely holding steady. "I made you something," Arjun said. Stepping forward, in his tiny hands was a folded paper star, carefully cut and colored in red and blue. In the center, written in his messy handwriting, were the words, "For the best Baba in the world. Don't be sad." Sundar took it gently, looking at it like it was made of glass. "Can I sleep here tonight?" Arjun asked. "Of course," Sundar whispered as Arjun curled up beside him. The house fell into silence once again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of disconnection. It was the silence of healing. Yet, even in his tender moment, Sundar didn't know what awaited him the next morning. Because just before dawn, he would receive a message that would test everything he thought he was beginning to repair. Asterisk. The message before dawn at 4:30 a.m. The world was still dark outside the window. The sky was a blanket of deep blue, and not even the birds had begun to stir. Sundar lay still in bed, barely breathing, with Arjun curled up beside him, his tiny hand resting on his father's chest like a gentle weight. It was the first time in weeks that Sundar had felt a moment of peace. The soft rhythm of Arjun's breathing, the quiet of the house, and the folded paper star still resting on the nightstand, it all made him feel something he hadn't in a long time. Grounded. But peace is often short-lived in the life of a man who leads one of the biggest companies in the world. His phone buzzed softly on the wooden nightstand. Once, twice, then a third time. He considered ignoring it. He had promised himself just hours ago that he would change, that he would be present, that he would stop chasing every emergency like the world depended on him, alone. But habit is a difficult beast to tame. He carefully slid out of bed, trying not to wake Arjun, and stepped into the hallway. The light from the screen nearly blinded him in the dark. There it was, a red alert, flagged by security. Tagged urgent. Sundar, we have a situation. He scrolled further and froze. Whistleblower within the AI ethics division has leaked confidential internal documents to the press. Story going public within 6 hours. Expect media chaos. His heart dropped. The message had come from Karen Lee, his chief of communications. Attached were screenshots of emails, PowerPoint slides, and a PDF labeled Internal Dissent, AI Bias. Concerns. It was the very thing they had been working to prevent. For months, Sundar had tried to manage concerns quietly within the team. Open forums, listening sessions, policy adjustments. But this leak was more than just a breach. It was a signal that someone inside no longer believed in private resolution. They had gone public. Sundar didn't move for several seconds. His fingers hovered over the screen as the weight of it all sank in. Every headline he imagined was brutal. Every scenario felt like a nightmare. And somewhere deep in his chest, a voice whispered, "This is going to define you." He glanced back at the bedroom door. Behind it, his son slept peacefully. The same son who just hours ago had prayed for him, asked for him to smile again. The same boy who had offered him a folded paper star and unconditional love. But now, less than 5 hours later, Sundar was being dragged back into the storm. He didn't even realize tears had welled in his eyes again. By 5 a.m., he was dressed and in his home office. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Or so he told himself. The virtual meeting with Karen and the legal team began under a cloud of tension. Karen's voice was clipped, efficient. The documents show internal emails about algorithmic bias in facial recognition. Some of the tone is emotional. One team member mentioned systemic negligence. Sundar rubbed his eyes. Do we know who leaked it? Not yet. We're scanning metadata. Have we responded to the journalist? Not officially. The story goes live at 9 a.m. Eastern. We have 3 hours to craft a statement. He paused, leaning back in his chair. No spin, he said finally. We tell the truth. We admit where we fell short. We lay out what we're doing to fix it. There was silence on the other end. Then Karen nodded. You sure? Yes. But inside, Sundar wasn't sure of anything. When the meeting ended, he sat alone in the office and stared at the screen. The glow illuminated the fatigue in his face, the lines that had deepened over the years. But it wasn't just the pressure of the company that weighed on him. It was the slow realization that somewhere along the way he had started reacting to life instead of living it. And in that still moment, something stirred in him. A strange, almost irrational thought what if he just stopped? Not forever, but for one day. What if, for once, he said no to the crisis? What if he trusted his team to handle it and walked away just for today? He looked toward the hallway where Arjun still slept. He thought of the prayer. The folded star. The way his son had looked at him, not with anger, but concern. And suddenly, the question felt less irrational. It felt necessary. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He turned off his laptop. He silenced his phone. And he walked out of the office. Downstairs, the house was quiet. The coffee machine blinked, waiting. The scent of Anjali's lavender candle still hung faintly in the air. And for the first time in a long while, Sundar didn't rush. He moved slowly, deliberately. He made toast, poured a glass of orange juice, and sat at the breakfast table like any ordinary man. Anjali walked in minutes later, eyes widening slightly when she saw him sitting there, calm, still, present. You're home? She asked softly, almost as if the illusion would break. Yeah, he said, just for today. She smiled gently, then looked at him closer. Something happened. A lot of things, he replied. But last night, something changed. Arjun prayed for me. Anjali's face softened, and she sat beside him. He's been worried. He misses you. I know. I miss him too. They sat there for a while in silence, the kind that feels like warmth, not weight. And when Arjun finally came downstairs, hair messy, rubbing his eyes, he stopped mid-step when he saw his father at the table. Baba? He asked, confused. Good morning, Sundar said, standing to pull out a chair. I made you toast. Not as good as Mama's, but I tried. Arjun blinked, then smiled shyly and sat down. You're not going to work? Not today, Sundar said. Today, I'm yours. And so began a day that no one in the Pichai family would ever forget. They went for a walk through the park, just the three of them. Sundar left his phone at home. They talked about clouds, birds, and Arjun's science fair. Sundar even reenacted the volcano eruption using an empty coffee cup and 2 fallen leaves. Making Arjun burst out laughing in public for the first time in weeks. They stopped for ice cream. They sat under a tree. They told silly stories. Sundar chased Arjun across the grass like he used to when Arjun was little. And for a few hours, the man who carried the weight of billions rediscovered the joy of simply being a father. But even beautiful days have shadows, because while Sundar was at the park, the story hit the front page of every major tech outlet. The backlash began. Headlines screamed about betrayal, transparency, ethical failures, and by evening, his name was trending across the world. When they returned home, the messages were waiting. Over 200 unread emails, missed calls from investors, press, inquiries, board members demanding statements. Angeli saw his face change the moment he checked the screen. The tension returned, the weariness, the old burden settling back on his shoulders. You don't have to fix everything tonight, she said quietly. They need me, Sundar whispered. This could destroy trust. Stock's already dropping. I have to, but before he could finish, Arjun walked into the room holding a folded blanket. Baba, he said, you promised today. Sundar looked at him, the phone still in his hand, and for a moment, he was caught between two worlds again, one filled with urgency, the other with meaning. His hand trembled slightly as he turned off the screen again and knelt down beside his son. You're right, he said. I promised. And as the sun set outside, father and son curled up on the couch, watching a nature documentary about lions and zebras. Arjun rested his head on Sundar's arm, and for the first time in months, Sundar felt like he belonged. Right where he was, but somewhere out there, beyond the warm glow of home. In the cold corridors of power and control, a member of the board was already preparing to call an emergency meeting. And the decision they were planning would change Sundar's life forever. Asterisk. The storm behind closed doors Monday morning came, wrapped in tension like a storm gathering in secret. The sky was gray. The air was still. Sundar stood at the kitchen sink, holding a warm cup of chai between his palms, staring through the window at nothing in particular. The weekend had felt like a dream, quiet moments with Arjun, soft laughter with Angeli, no meetings, no pings, no pressure, just presence, just peace. But now, reality was coming back fast, and it wasn't knocking politely at exactly 7:45 a.m. The silence was broken by the familiar buzz of his phone. The screen lit up with a message from Dev Mehra, the chairman of the board. Sundar, emergency session today. 11 a.m. Pacific. Mandatory. No exceptions. Below that, a single sentence that made his stomach twist. We need to talk about leadership transition. His hand went cold. He set the cup down, the ceramic clinking gently against the counter, but his pulse was loud and fast in his ears. For years, he had led Google through crises, innovations, and revolutions. He had earned trust, navigated impossible tensions, and built bridges between tech and humanity. And now, because of one leak, one media storm, the board was questioning his future. Angeli walked in, still in her robe, her hair tied up loosely. She saw his face and didn't need to ask. They're going after you, aren't they? She asked quietly. He nodded slowly. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She simply stepped closer and placed her hand on his chest, just above his heart. Whatever happens, she said, don't let them steal your peace again. Not after this weekend. You found something. Something real. He looked at her, eyes filled with both gratitude and dread. What if they push me out? Then maybe it's time, she said softly. Maybe it's a gift in disguise. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The idea of stepping down wasn't just foreign. It was terrifying. What was Sundar Pichai without Google? Who was he if not the CEO everyone looked to for answers? But beneath that fear, something stirred. Something he hadn't admitted to even himself. What if she was right? At 11 a.m., Sundar entered the virtual board meeting from his study. Every face that appeared on the screen looked serious, some guarded, others visibly uncomfortable. Dev Mehra cleared his throat. Thank you all for joining. Let's begin. The meeting was long. Over 90 minutes of questions, concerns, debates. The leak had gone viral. Former employees were coming forward. The public was demanding transparency. Investors were nervous. And in the center of it all was Sundar, calm on the outside, burning on the inside. At one point, an older board member leaned forward. Sundar, this isn't personal, she said. We respect you deeply, but perception matters. And right now, the narrative is slipping away. I understand, Sundar replied, but the truth matters more than the narrative. And I'm willing to face this, to fix this, to rebuild trust. A few heads nodded, but others remained still. Then Dev spoke again. We've drafted a plan, he said. Temporary delegation of duties. A 3-month pause from public appearances. Time for you to regroup, reflect, allow the storm to pass. Sundar's heart dropped. It wasn't a firing, but it was a sidelining, a slow removal. The beginning of the end. And if I say no, he asked. Dev hesitated. We'd have to consider more permanent decisions. The screen went quiet. No one spoke. No one defended him. And in that silence, Sundar saw the truth. He had always been a servant leader, humble, deliberate, thoughtful. But the world of tech didn't run on humility. It ran on noise, reaction, optics. And now, his refusal to play that game was costing him everything. When the meeting ended, Sundar didn't move for a long time. He just sat there staring at the screen, the reflection of his tired eyes looking back at him. Anjali entered quietly, carrying a cup of chai. How bad? She asked. They want me to step back. Let someone else speak for the company. They say it's temporary. She set the cup down beside him. But you know it's not, she said. He nodded. That evening, he took Arjun out for a walk again. They didn't go far, just around the block, but something about the open air helped clear Sundar's mind. Arjun walked beside him, swinging a stick and humming a tune. Baba, he said suddenly, what do you do when people don't like you anymore? Sundar stopped walking. Why do you ask that? He said, kneeling beside his son. Some kids at school were laughing when I said you were my dad. They said your company's in trouble. The pain of those words hit deeper than anything the board had said. Sundar swallowed hard. Asterisk. What did you say back? He asked gently. I said you're the best Baba in the world, Arjun replied. And that even if people are mad, you're still kind. Sundar smiled, tears stinging his eyes. You said that? Yeah, because it's true. They sat on a bench by the sidewalk for a while. The wind rustled through the leaves. Sundar looked up at the trees, feeling the weight of the day lifting just a little. Arjun, he said slowly, sometimes being a leader means people get upset with you. Even when you try your best, and sometimes ... It means you have to make hard choices. Like what? Like walking away. Even if you're not ready. Arjun was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out another folded paper star. I made a new one, he said. It's blue this time. Blue means strong. Sundar took the paper star with trembling hands. Thank you, he whispered. That night he didn't return to his emails. He didn't take any calls. Instead, he wrote a letter. Not to the board. Not to the press. But to himself. A letter he would need to read again in the days to come. In it, he wrote, I forgot who I was. I became the job, the pressure, the brand. But last night, my son prayed for me, not because I'm a CEO, but because I am his Baba, and that is who I wanted to be again. Not a symbol, just a man, a father, a human being. He signed it, folded it, and placed it beside Arjun's paper stars. Just before sunrise. His phone buzzed one more time. This time. It wasn't from the board. It was from a name he hadn't seen in years. Asterisk, the voice from the past. The room was still cloaked in soft gray light when Sundar sat up in bed. The first sounds of morning were just beginning to whisper through the house. The hum of the heater, the chirp of a bird outside the window, the faint rustling of Arjun's blanket as he rolled over in his sleep. But Sundar couldn't focus on any of it. His eyes were locked on the screen of his phone, glowing faintly in the quiet. Message from Professor Natarajan. Breath. He hadn't heard that name in over 2 decades. Professor M.S. Natarajan had been Sundar's mentor during his university days in India. A brilliant man, stern, wise, unshakably principled. It was Natarajan who first encouraged Sundar to think differently, to challenge systems with humility rather than ego. He was the first person to tell Sundar, your mind will change the world, but your heart will guide how. They had lost touch after Sundar moved to the United States. A few emails here and there in the early years, nothing recent. And yet, here it was A message completely unexpected. Arriving at a moment when Sundar's world was unraveling, his fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. My dear Sundar, I have been watching. Not the headlines. Those mean little. I have been watching you. Your posture. Your eyes. Your silence. You look like a man carrying the weight of too many worlds. Do not forget who you were before the world crowned you. You were not born to be a CEO. You were born to be someone who listens, learns, and leads from the heart. The real measure of your success is not in shareholders or stock price. It is in how your son looks at you when you walk into the room. Come visit me. I'm Cozy Code. Now I have something to show you. Natarajan stared at the screen for several minutes, his thoughts racing. What could Natarajan possibly have to show him now? Why reach out after all this time? And why did the message feel more like a calling than an invitation? Anjali found him still sitting at the edge of the bed when she woke up. What is it? She asked softly. He showed her the message. She read it carefully. Ben looked up. You should go, she said. What about everything happening here? That's exactly why you should go. The board will think I'm running away. Let them, she said. You're not running away. You're remembering who you are. He looked at her, eyes wide with uncertainty. It feels selfish. She touched his cheek, her voice tender. No, Sundar. Being a father, being a man who still believes in meaning, that's not selfish. It's survival. The next morning, Sundar boarded a plane alone. No assistance. No security detail. No briefcase. Just a backpack, a book, and a folded paper star from Arjun tucked inside his jacket pocket dot when he landed in India. The air greeted him like a forgotten friend, warm, thick with scent, humming with life. Every smell, every sound, every crack in the sidewalk stirred something in him that had been buried under years of corporate silence. He rented a car and drove through narrow roads, past tea stalls and rickshaws, past school children in dusty uniforms. An elder sitting on charpoys with steaming cups of chai. Everything felt real here. Slow, alive. When he reached Cozy Code, Professor Natarajan's home stood just beyond the river, a simple white house shaded by tall palm trees. Sundar stepped out of the car, heart pounding like it had on his very first day at university. Natarajan opened the door himself. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were the same, sharp, warm, knowing. You came, the professor said with a quiet smile. I had to, Sundar replied. They sat outside under the trees, sipping chai and watching the sky shift with the breeze. I am sorry I haven't kept in touch, Sundar said after a while. You were busy building the future. Natarajan replied. But the future doesn't mean much if we lose our way. Sundar sighed. I think I have. Lost my way, I mean. Natarajan nodded slowly, not in judgment, but understanding. And what brought you back? My son, Sundar said. He prayed for me. He asked God to make me smile again. The professor closed his eyes for a second, breathing in the weight of that. Children see truth more clearly than we do, he said. We get blinded by position, by pressure, but they know love when they see it disappear. A pause. I'm scared, Sundar admitted. They want to remove me. Maybe not now. But soon, then let them, Natarajan said calmly. But I've given everything to this. Everything. And in return, it took everything from you, didn't it? Sundar looked down, silent. Walk with me. The professor said. They walked through a narrow path behind the house, over cracked stones and flowering trees. At the end of the trail was a small school, modest, crowded, buzzing with the joyful noise of children laughing and learning. I come here every day now, Natarajan said. I teach science to kids who can't afford private tutors. Some of them don't have shoes, but they have curiosity and hope. Sundar watched through the window as a girl raised her hand with a smile too big for her face. They don't know who you are, Natarajan said. But if you walk into that room and teach them how to paper volcano ... they will never forget you. Something inside Sundar cracked open again. You brought me here to teach? No, the professor said. I brought you here to remember. That afternoon, Sundar sat on the floor of that classroom and taught 3 students how to build a simple circuit using a battery and a light bulb. They giggled when the bulb lit up. One of them clapped Dot and Sundar smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in what felt like years. Dot later that night, he called Arjun. How's India? Arjun asked excitedly. Hot, noisy, amazing. Sundar laughed. Guess what I did today? What? I taught a science class. And I made a little girl's eyes light up when her project worked. Arjun beamed through the video screen. Like my volcano. Exactly like your volcano. They talked for 20 minutes. Sundar didn't check the time. When they hung up, he stared at the ceiling of the guest room, thinking not about stock prices or board decisions or media narratives, but about paper stars, classroom circuits, and little hands clapping in joy. Dot. But as he prepared to return home the next day, a storm awaited him, one that would not be as kind. Because while Sundar had been reconnecting with his soul, the board had made a final decision, and the press was already preparing their headlines. Asterisk the headlines he couldn't. Outrun's plane sliced through the clouds somewhere over the Atlantic. Inside, Sundar sat quietly by the window, gazing into the endless blue sky. His hands resting on the folded letter Professor Natarajan had slipped into his bag before he left. The letter wasn't long. Just a few handwritten lines on thick cream paper, words etched with care. True leadership isn't about being at the front. It's about knowing when to step aside so that others may rise. When your legacy is measured in love, you've already won. Natarajan, he closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, wasn't afraid of what was waiting for him back in California. He had seen something in those children in Cozy Code, a purity, a hunger. And in their eyes, he had glimpsed his younger self, the boy who used to climb rooftops in Chennai, just to stare at the stars and dream of impossible things, but dreams have their price. And Sundar knew that no matter how peaceful his soul felt. After those few days in India, the world he was returning to was not made of paper stars or childlike wonder. Dot as the plane landed in San Francisco. His phone came back to life with a flurry of buzzes, 22 missed calls, over 100 texts, news alerts piling one over another. He hesitated before unlocking the screen, and then he saw it. Breaking. Google CEO Sundar Pichai to be replaced in executive shakeup. Below the headline was his face. Not smiling. Not glowing, but tired. Worn. His chest tightened. His thumb froze over the notifications as the air inside the plane suddenly felt thinner. He didn't even realize the plane had stopped moving until the flight attendant gently tapped his shoulder. Mr. Pichai? We've arrived. He nodded and stood, slowly. His legs felt heavy. His hands were ice. But he walked forward, carrying only his small bag and 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. The ride home was quiet. He didn't answer any calls. He didn't reply to any messages. He just stared out the window as the streets of Silicon Valley rolled past. Familiar and foreign all at once. Dot. When he arrived, Arjun ran to the door, arms wide. Baba. Sundar dropped his bag and caught his son in a tight hug, holding him longer than usual. I missed you so much, Arjun said. I missed you more. Sundar whispered. Njal. I stood nearby, her face calm, but her eyes full of silent understanding. You've seen it? She asked. He nodded. They didn't even wait for me to come back. Of course they didn't, she said softly. They were never going to. He sat down at the kitchen table, his hands shaking slightly as he picked up the paper star Arjun had left there. This one green. What does green mean? Sundar asked. Hope, Arjun said simply. He nodded, holding back tears. Njal. I sat beside him. You don't have to go back there. Not to fight. Not to explain. It's over. I know, he said. But it doesn't feel like failure. Not anymore. Because it's not, she said. It's freedom. That night, the world swirled with headlines. Analysts speculated about the future of the company. Journalists dissected his fall from grace. Pundits argued over whether his leadership had been too soft, too slow, too idealistic. Social media burned with opinions. But in a quiet corner of Palo Alto, Sundar read Arjun a bedtime story about a lion who lost his crown, but found his courage. And when Arjun finally drifted off to sleep, Sundar stayed by his side, watching him. Breathe, remembering the prayer that had changed everything. Please help Baba. Arjun had whispered that night. And somehow the universe had listened. The next morning, Sundar woke early. He put on simple clothes, no watch, no suit, just himself. He walked into the garage, picked up an old cardboard box filled with childhood memories, and sat down in the driveway. He pulled out old photographs, him and Anjali in their dorm, Arjun as a baby, his first Google badge, and slowly began to pack away the pieces of that chapter. When he reached the bottom of the box, he found something unexpected. A tiny crumpled note written in his father's handwriting from years ago. He had saved it without realizing. Never forget, what you build is not just made of glass and steel. It is made of moments of kindness, of how you treat people when no one is watching. He stared at it for a long time, and then he smiled. Later that day, a former intern named Ravi called him. Someone Sundar had mentored personally 5 years ago. Sure. Ravi said, voice trembling, I just wanted to say, you changed my life, not with your title, not with your fame, but the way you treated me, like I mattered. Sundar closed his eyes, breathing in the truth of it. After the call, he opened his laptop, not to check headlines, not to respond to emails, but to begin something new. He opened a blank document and typed just 3 words. The next chapter, he didn't know what that would look like yet. Maybe he would teach. Maybe he'd start a foundation. Maybe he'd just be a father for a while, but he knew this. He would no longer live on borrowed time or corporate timelines. He would live for mornings like this. For laughter like Arjun's. For peace like he found under the trees in KOD. Just as he leaned back in his chair. The doorbell rang. He opened the door to find a reporter standing outside. Young, nervous, clearly not expecting Sundar himself to answer. Mr. Pichai? She stammered. Do you have a comment on your departure? Sundar smiled gently. Tell them I'm finally home. And with that, he closed the door behind him. But deep in the city, beyond the quiet streets and folded paper stars, a video was already going viral. A video that would spark something far bigger than Sundar could ever imagine, because someone had uploaded a clip from his last public speech, a speech no one had paid much attention to at the time. In the video, Sundar was standing on a stage, speaking to a room full of students. Leadership, he said, is not about the power you hold. It's about the peace you protect. And if I ever forget that, remind me, even if it costs me everything. And now the world was beginning to listen. Asterisk when the world paused to listen, the internet has a strange way of remembering things it once ignored, like an echo that takes time to find its voice. Sometimes words spoken in passing begin to ripple long after they're said. That video, the one from Sundar's final public appearance before the storm, had been buried in an obscure corner of YouTube for nearly 3 months. The hall had been small, the audience modest. Just a few hundred university students, on folding chairs, most of them more excited to post selfies than listen. But now, those 28 seconds were everywhere. Leadership is not about the power you hold. It's about the peace you protect. And if I ever forget that, remind me, even if it costs me everything. People didn't just watch it. They felt it. Comment after comment poured in. He was never weak. He was just real. I'd follow a leader like this any day. This broke me. Now I understand what he stood for. He didn't lose. He evolved. Within hours, the clip exploded across platforms. Journalists rewrote their narratives. Former critics began posting threads about Sundar's quiet legacy, the initiatives he championed for rural internet access, his refusal to let facial recognition be weaponized, the scholarships he funded without press releases. Even former employees who had remained silent during the ethics leak began coming forward, one by one, with stories that painted a very different picture. One intern wrote about the time. Sundar stayed late to walk her to her car when she worked past midnight data. Security guard shared how Sundar once stood in the rain beside him during a fire drill, refusing to go inside until the guard's shift was over. Janitor posted a photo of a handwritten note Sundar had left him after seeing him cry quietly in a hallway. You matter. Never forget that. The world wasn't just remembering Sundar, was re-seeing him dot in the middle of all this. Sundar remained completely offline. Not as a strategy, but as a necessity. The fame, the noise, it no longer fed him. It exhausted him. Instead, he spent those days like a man rediscovering life. One morning, he helped Arjun build a bird feeder. They placed it outside the kitchen window and waited patiently until the first sparrow appeared. See that? Sundar whispered, double quotes, what? Arjun asked, you don't have to chase everything. Sometimes, what you need comes when you're still. That afternoon they cooked together, or tried to. Arjun accidentally spilled flour all over the floor, and Sundar laughed so hard his stomach hurt. And JL, I watched them from across the room, a soft smile on her lips. For the first time in years, her husband wasn't sprinting through life. He was walking, slowly, fully. But peace doesn't go unnoticed. And soon, the door that had once been shut so loudly began to knock again. This time, with reverence. Representatives from educational foundations, global nonprofits, even world leaders began reaching out, not to offer another job, but to ask for something more meaningful. His voice, his presence, his wisdom. We're starting an initiative for rural education, said a woman from a global children's fund. We don't want a spokesperson. We want someone who understands the difference between leadership and ego. Would you join us? At first, Sundar hesitated, not because he didn't care, but because he was still learning how to say yes for the right reasons. So he asked himself a simple question, the same one Arjun had knowingly asked the night of that prayer. Who do I want to be when no one's looking? And the answer came with clarity. Not a CEO, not a hero. Just a man who listened and helped. 3 months after his departure, Sundar took the stage again. Not at a press conference or tech summit, but in a modest auditorium at a public school in Oakland. The seats were filled with students, teachers, and parents. There were no lights, no sponsors, no media. Just people. And Sundar stood in front of them, wearing a simple shirt, holding nothing but a microphone. 3 months ago, he began, I thought I had lost everything, but what I really lost were the parts of me I didn't need anymore. The noise, the speed, the illusion that leadership is louder than love. The room was silent, every eye watching him. My son prayed for me, he continued, voice trembling. Not because I was powerful, but because I was tired. And in that prayer, I found the courage to break. He paused, breathing in the moment. I'm not here to tell you how to be great. I'm here to tell you it's okay to rest. It's okay to choose meaning over metrics. It's okay to walk away. If walking away brings you closer to the people you love. A standing ovation followed. Not out of obligation, but out of awe. And as Sundar stepped down from the stage, Arjun ran into his arms. You didn't cry this time, Arjun said with a smile. No, Sundar whispered, because this time I'm already whole. The weeks that followed weren't filled with headlines. They were filled with gardens, paper stars, classroom visits, early mornings, and late night stories. He began writing a book, not a memoir, but a guide, titled Leading from the Middle. It wasn't about how to become a CEO. It was about how to remain human in a world that rewards masks. He created a scholarship fund in honor of Professor Natarajan. Started a mentorship program for high school students in underserved areas. And every Friday, without fail, he taught a science class to kids who reminded him of the boy he used to be. One afternoon, during class, a little girl tugged his sleeve. Sir? She said, why did you stop being a big boss? He knelt beside her, smiling, because being your teacher means more to me than being anyone's boss. That night, Sundar stood in the backyard with Arjun, watching the stars. Baba, Arjun said, are you happy now? Sundar looked up at the sky, at the vastness of it, and then down at his son's face glowing in the moonlight. Yes, he said quietly. I am. So, ... Do you think God answered my prayer? Sundar's throat tightened, but he nodded ... double quotes. Yes, Arjun. He didn't just answer it, he became it. As they stood there, a cool breeze blew across the yard, and in the distance, a night bird sang ... and for the first time in a long time, Sundar didn't feel like he had to chase anything. He had already arrived. Asterisk.